So here I am in Munich at the IAA Mobility 2025 show, and that's a video for another time. But for today, I thought I would take a recent panel discussion that I was on at the WesBank Evolution, where we talked about everything to do with electric vehicles in South Africa and the state of the industry. I found it to be quite engaging, a lot of rich discussion, and some key talking points around the battery value chain, around the skills mix that are required to grow the industry, around the state of the charging infrastructure, some of the differences in the types of drivetrains that we're seeing, and also a look into the public transport and fleet electrification status of the country. So if you can't watch this video, maybe you can listen to it as a podcast. Otherwise, please enjoy, and I'll see you on the next one.
So I think, there's a couple of things. I think from an EV value chain perspective, we're starting to see new areas open up that we previously never saw before. So battery assembly, battery manufacturing as a value chain, we're starting to see it happening on the stationary energy storage side in response to home requirements for home batteries, but certainly that can be extended into the EV world. We're seeing the value chain around energy as a service, vehicle to grid, vehicle to load. These are all new areas that would not have been possible in any other form besides what the EV market is bringing us in terms of the battery value chain. Battery recycling is something that is an untapped market for South Africa and Africa to look at, particularly the concept called urban mining, which is being able to reclaim the critical minerals out of batteries that are 15 to 20 years old and remake new batteries. So there's this constant supply of minerals. The second layer I would say is around infrastructure. We've seen fantastic progress from the private sector, the likes of Winston and Grid Cars that are here today, that have invested early for us to be able to be where we are, to have that infrastructure. That's created new skills requirements, new job opportunities, technical skills that are needed to maintain and operate these networks, for example. We'll also see that cascading into different forms of charging spaces. We think about always stopping at a fuel station to charge, but in the future we're going to see destination charging. We're going to see chargers that are available outside of rooms like this or at conference centers. We'll see them at dealerships who need to transform to become almost charging lounges and attract customers back more than once a year, but every once a week even, to come and charge. So this is creating a ripple effect of opportunities for people to evolve and also to innovate and create new business models, which is super exciting. No, I think there's a misnomer in the industry to think of other sustainable mobility technologies competing with electric vehicles. I think the horse is bolted, to use that term, in the sense that the electric motor is going to be what drives propulsion, whether it's in a passenger vehicle, a truck, or in a micro-mobility scenario. But it's the battery storage component to that is going to be continuously evolving. So right now we're sitting with battery electric vehicles, which is the energy is stored in a lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt battery. And in future, we're going to see evolutions of the battery technology going to LFP. The council mentioned solid state. Those are all battery technologies that are coming. We're seeing the fastest technological change curve in battery chemistry is happening right now, driven largely by companies like BYD, CATL, Panasonic, and others. So the battery electric vehicles here to stay. But then you might find applications and use cases, for example, for a hydrogen type of scenario with a large trucking fleet that might look at a fuel cell scenario. But ultimately, that's still an electric vehicle. It's not different. There's other types of mobility that's evolving there as well. So it's all about understanding that you can decouple the energy storage component from the propulsion component when it comes to sustainable mobility. I think for me, I've been through a bit of a personal journey on this as well. I can say I've crossed over to the other side in the sense that I am an EV driver. I have been driving an EV for about a year and a half. Prior to that, I was actually a hybrid driver for a year and a half. So I've kind of taken, I would guess, the two steps that many people are thinking about taking. And let's not forget, if the growing number of hybrids that are being sold, and now the plug-in hybrids are coming as well, is going to be the first exposure for many people to be able to drive an EV mode and experience the silence, and to some degree also experience the performance boost that you get with an EV, which for me is one of the most exciting aspects of this technology, is that it's just an incredible experience to drive these cars. So I hope that, by crossing over, you can, and many more people will start to do so. People will start to recognize that it's possible. They will start to see more and more charging stations appearing on the N3, on the N1, on the N2. They'll start to see charging stations appearing at shopping centers and at corporate parks, at your enterprise clients. They'll see them at fleet operators. They'll see more and more delivery vans coming that are EV. And that'll start to turn the tide, hopefully in people's minds, that this is a reality. It's not something in the future. It's happening here today, and I might as well get onto it. Beyond just in a conference scenario or conference setting and talking about it, what we love to do, and there's a few colleagues in the room that have done this with me, we'd like to do this for real and take test drives and go for road trips and bring emobility to people. I mean, there was a road trip we did last year with Ma'am Shani and Namsa and the colleagues where we did 2,300 kilometers in 5 EVs as a lead up to SA Auto Week. And every time we stopped at a charging station, the amount of people that would flock to the car to ask questions: how does this work? What's a kilowatt hour? What's the difference between that and a petrol car? How far can you go? How long does it take to drive? We love to engage and just bring this reality to the mass market out there. And there's so much interest in the technical ability of it, and the fact that this is such a technologically driven transition we're living through. So I could just concur with Linda. We'd love to continue. I think there's a critical data point that we must keep in mind. It's the state of health of the battery, the SOH of the battery. We're seeing cars are now doing 300,000 to 500,000 kilometers, and the state of health of the battery after that is still between 85% to 90%. That's still a very usable capacity for that vehicle to have a second cycle, a third cycle of life. And so I think the likes of a TransUnion and a Lightstone and others need to work in conjunction with WesBank to see how do we apply that data point to the valuation of a second-hand car. The We Buy Cars models that are now doing automated valuations also need to consider this in terms of what is the actual market for that second-hand vehicle. Because in many respects, some EVs are holding their value, whereas the premium EVs that were sold, well over 2 million rand, have dropped a lot of value. But that's really just got to do with normal market dynamics, not so much the technologies. That inflection point is critical. What I've seen around the world is that inflection point sits at 5% of vehicle sales. So once EVs hit the 5% mark, it's the beginning of the S-curve of growth. Like you say, we are in the fractions of a percent, so roughly below 1%, but it's that 5% mark we need to shoot towards. And that roughly means we need to be selling around 2,000 EVs a month, 25,000 cars a year. When we hit that mark, we should be well on our way.
What can we do for the public transport sector? How do we get people into electric buses? How do we get people into electrified taxis? 250,000 taxis are moving 15 million people every day. And if we can get that sector electrified and get some investments into setting up charging infrastructure at taxi ranks, those are different types of questions that we can start to think about when it comes to getting more people included in this mobility revolution. So in terms of growth, if you think back to 2022, that's when Toyota introduced the Corolla Cross Hybrid. And since then, we saw the market grow from 4,000 to 6,000 to 13,000 hybrid EVs sold last year. And now we're seeing in the past 3 or 4 months, brands like Chatua, JQ, Omoda, Chery, BYD bringing in plug-in hybrid EVs. And that allows people to drive EV for about 100 kilometers before even using petrol. So last year we saw around 1,500 pure EVs sold, and this year we're tracking to go over 2,000 EVs sold in terms of the year. Now that's still not a lot considering the number of vehicles sold per year, but it's this inflection curve, it's this growth curve that the country needs to get on to start seeing the success around EV adoption that we're seeing in other markets around the world. And even in Africa, we're seeing this starting to happen.